It is 1 o'clock on Tuesday. It is time for Hug Nation. Let's just sink into this now moment. Become aware of the sounds filling our world. More specifically, aware of the vibrations hitting our ears. Just become aware of the different sounds, the pitch, the tones. I hear gurgle, gurgle. I hear a whir. I hear a zoom. I hear my own voice. And then go to your body and become aware of the sensations as you sit. Feel yourself in the chair. Feel your feet on the ground. Trace your body from toe, foot, ankle, calf, knee, thigh, seat, abdomen, belly, chest, shoulders, down your arms to your fingers and back. To your shoulders, to your neck, the back of your neck, to your face, and then crowning your head. The only thing real is the now, the sensations of the now, and the thoughts. But those thoughts are real in that they are really thoughts, but the contents of those thoughts are for us to receive and experience however we wish. And so with discipline, by becoming aware of what is experienced in the now, becoming aware of those thoughts as they enter our head, and then being critical and deciding if it's a belief that we want to ingest or spit out, can make all the difference. Thank you, universe, for this buffet of experiences and feelings and thoughts. What a blessing. Fill us with appreciation for this life so we may spread our exuberance to the world. Amen. Welcome! Look where we are! I'm in my house! A number of circumstances led me to be here today for Hug Nation. Don't know when this will happen again, so let's appreciate this now moment. Whee! Thank you for being here, a part of this now. Whether you are live or archived, whether this vibration is happening in the same time and space as I'm experiencing it right now, or if you are experiencing it when you receive this archive. What a gift! And what an amazing technological, miraculous world we live in, where we can have that experience of kind of taking emotion, experience, thought, vibration, bottling it up through recording devices and then releasing it whenever we like. One of the joys, one of the turning points of my life is when I realized that I should be bottling up my grandpa's joy and exuberance, and then really became a purpose for me to share that with the world. It's always a kick when I get to share him with another audience. This last Sunday, I played the Pink Path film at the Egyptian Theater, which is a huge, beautiful theater. And before we showed the Pink Path, since it's only 22 minutes, I showed a 16-minute video about my grandpa. And it was so much fun to share. It was also fun. I gave a little talk beforehand and then showed the movie. And it was cool when I was telling stories that people would ask, I would tell a story and then realize, oh wait, you're going to see, in Grandpa video, you're going to get to see him talk about that. Which is, don't get me wrong, I do like the sound of my voice. But hearing it from the mouth of Caleb is far better. So, maybe more on that later, but today I wanted to talk about kind of a topic that comes up and around kind of regularly. And that is about money and abundance and resources and flow. It is very easy to cast stones at the idea of money. But I think it's important to recognize what aspects of money that you're actually frustrated by. Money itself is not good or bad. It is a symbol that represents time, basically, or a more physical resource. Like it could represent an ear of corn, or it could represent an hour spent painting my house. And rather than keep track of how many hours painting and ears of corn that everybody owes me, we figure out a monetary system to facilitate, really for trading, so that you could trade between cities as the world began to grow from, nomadic tribes that would meet one another. And if you want to question any of my historical facts, that would be wise. But for the sake of moving forward, let's move forward. So, money in itself is not good or bad. What has happened in the modern world is we've fallen into a corruption of a capitalist system. A capitalist system by nature is actually not either good or bad either. I used to just be very sickened by money. And I think what I was really sickened by was the feeling that I couldn't think about what I wanted to do because I always had to think about how could I get resources to do that thing. And so I became really frustrated with the whole concept of being trapped by lack of resources. And I think what happened was, by my belief that money was this bad thing, energetically I was certainly not receptive to getting more money. I think that, from a law of attraction sense, if you are, pissed off about the monetary system, then you are a vibration with lack. So I was in that for a long time. I remember a big turning point for me when Hug Nation, the original version of it, when I was in the webcam house, we first we had some funding when we were part of Citizen X, and then it went less and less and less and less and less, and then I was struggling for donations and help, and then finally had to just shut it down and run it really bare bones. And I wondered what would have happened if I had more money. I wonder if I could have made Hug Nation into something magnificent and grand. And how many more people could have been touched by this idea that I think was beautiful and really had nothing to do with money, except that it needs money to exist and grow and spread. And about that time I also started working for somebody who was a successful capitalist. And at one time we were kind of in a little heated debate over alcoholic beverages, and he basically said, capitalism is my religion. And I was like, why not just follow the Pope, why don't you, if you're going to go for corrupt systems? I'm sorry, that was a low blow, I didn't mean that. I'm just bitter that I didn't get selected as Pope, so I wasn't even in the running. Although, if you saw, there was a protest at the Vatican where a feminist group released a bunch of pink smoke to protest the lack of women in the church. And at least that's what the party line is. What I think what really happened was, I won. And then there's this huge cover-up. They suddenly made this huge story about feminist agenda. I'm always the victim of the feminist agenda. Sorry. So, Pope, money. Oh yeah, so he said he worships money. Or he worships capitalism. And I was like, ugh. And then he said, look, money is neither good nor bad. It's just a representative thing. And capitalism is this genius system that allows the people and the system to vote for what we want. If you want to know what people truly like and want and value in our world, look where the money's going, because that's how we vote. If you say, down with coal, and then you don't turn off your lights, then, you're spending money on electricity that's fossil fuels are being used to do, and you're kind of out of integrity in some way. That was a terrible example. A better example is think about how, if in our culture, if a store opens up and they sell marvelous magic bouncy balls. And there's a line around the block because everyone likes these bouncy balls. Very quickly, another store is going to open up and sell another version of bouncy balls because that's how it works. And so we start getting more and more, and this company starts growing. They open chains. Pretty soon, we got every previous yogurt store has now been converted to a bouncy ball store. That's how the system works. Same is true. Now, where this gets corrupted is through corporatism and through corporatism's impact on like policy and law. But let's avoid that just for a second. Let's come back to just the basics of money. And one of the things that, because we often get trained to be in a lack mentality, our relationship with money is one of acquisition and hoarding. There's so much fear about safety and security, and so there's this feeling that I need to get enough so that I'm never, whatever the panic state is, homeless or my kids can't go to college or whatever the state is. Unfortunately, it's interesting if you talk to someone who's got that mentality and they say, well, I need to put money away so that I am safe, and then you ask them, what's the dollar amount that you'll be safe at? Most people do not have a dollar amount. And even if they do, usually when they get there, they'll say, man, you know what? $1 million isn't what it used to be. This is not really as secure as it was when I first made that goal of making $1 million. And so we get in this trap of money as being a theoretical net of security. When the true things that can knock us down, traffic accidents, health problems, stress that is caused by a panic about money, have nothing to do with that money shield. What money actually is for is to buy time and experience. And so if you are using money to try to get those two things, then hooray, I think you've pretty much figured out the whole point. It's not good or bad. It's to try to get more experiences or allow yourself to have experiences, or to allow yourself more time. So if you hire a housekeeper, that's time. If you go on a trip, that's an experience. If you have a meal, that's an experience and time because someone else is cooking. Now, I had I think I mentioned this recently, but a meeting with a guy who had done quite well for himself, and he made all sorts of millions. And in the conversation, at one point it was brought up that in a recent business dealing, he had basically accepted a deal that he could have fought for and probably gotten more money out of. But he basically took a lesser amount of money in order for some options, and blah, 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 and a lot of people were like, why didn't you fight harder to get more? And he said, 14 million, 12 million, is it going to make my coffee taste any better? And I thought it was just a beautiful idea. And he hits on something that I think is a critical part of the equation of money and our perception that it will make us happier, because we know that it doesn't, right? Or it can, but it doesn't necessarily. Like when they look at people who win the lottery, they have this spike of joy, and then they go back to the baseline of however happy they were. There's a great kind of idea that's explored in the movie I Am, and it talks about what money can and can't do for you. And the truth is, if you are cold and hungry and got no place to live, it's very hard to be happy. If your basic needs are not met, you are unhappy. Well, let me say that again. You have a lot of reasons and a lot of actual non-mental reasons that are going to cause you to suffer. And so in that situation, if you can acquire some money and you can take care of those needs and feed yourself and get warm and get a place to stay and get clothes, then your joy level, your happiness is going to go from very low to satisfied. And that's a huge jump. It actually doesn't take that much. you're basically going above the poverty line. Now, the trap is that we think that, cool, this amount of money, or actually this amount of money, caused this huge jump in joy. Therefore, if I just keep accumulating money, then I'll just get happier and happier and happier. And all the research shows that's not the case. You can get a little bit. You know, you get a thrill when you get that new jet ski. You get a thrill when you get that new outfit. You get a thrill when you take that new pill. But those aren't the things that give you the joy and the same joy that's actually taking care of true obstacles to pleasure, which are the lack of shelter, food, hunger. So, I think it's important to think about all those things as you get frustrated about money. The other part of it that I think that I've been thinking about a lot lately and trying to practice more is the idea that you cannot receive while your hands are closed tight. If you are holding tight to what you have, you are in a bad position to receive. And I think that the people I know that seem to get the most abundance in their life are often the most generous ones. I had a talk with my friend Dimitri a while back, and here's a guy who has kind of been part of huge deals with business, and then the business flails, and another huge business, and then that business goes out of business, and no matter where he is on these cycles, he is so you have to basically approach the waitress and say, hey, don't bring the check to the table. Let me pay for it now. He will, no matter where he is, he tries to be. He just takes care of things. He just wants to pay whenever possible. And I once asked him, like, well, how? I mean, don't you sometimes worry, like, oh, I'm getting a little tight here? And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but my memory is something like, well, isn't that what it's for? Like, if I have resources, it's to spend and to share and to give. And if I get to a point where I run out, well, that's how I'll know that I should stop. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And so he's inspired me to be much more loose with my picking up the tab, or which has been interesting because when I hang out with him so much, one of us always just grabs the check. And so now when I'm in situations where people like put the check and people like are trying to figure out what each person is supposed to pay in the bill, I'm like, oh, should I just pick it up? Or, all right, we'll chip in. It's all good. But another thing that I just read the book Delivering Happiness by the guy who started Zappos. Tony, Hsieh. And I'm gonna put his picture up because I looked at the picture a bunch of times when I was reading the book because I was so inspired. I want to know who this guy was. Who was this guy? So, if you've read this, I haven't read it. I read it because I'm working on building company culture in my new place of work. But it's so much more than about business and about work and about money. And one of the great, there's a lot of really interesting things in it. But so his first company, he sells, I think, for like $30 or $40 million. At least that's what's his cut of it. And part of his money was, or his payout when I think Microsoft bought it, was that he had to stay at the company for another year. And so he basically would show up in the middle of the day, read his email, go home, and he had to do that basically just hang out for a year, and to do that, and if he didn't do that, he would lose 20% of that, whatever, $40 million. And after a couple months of doing this, he's looking around at the world and he goes, gosh, it's just an exciting time for the internet. Why am I just sitting here in this office? And the answer is money. That's the only reason. And then he said, well, but I have way more money than I know what to do with. Like, sacrificing a year of my life in exchange for just because I should want more money is ridiculous. So he quit. And he basically said, no, thank you. He could have spent 8 more months doing nothing, just showing up at a job and checking his email playing solitaire, and he gave up like $12 million. I was like, whoa, that is inspiring. Good job. And so then he went to work and started an incubator and started other things. And eventually one of the things he was working on was Zappos, which as it went over time, he eventually put some of his money, then some of his money, then some of it, and eventually all of his money, including his condo. He sold everything when times were lean for Zappos. Which I was like, what an awesome role model of somebody who did not hoard. That's somebody who was just like, what's it for? How do I know when I should stop spending? Because it's gone. And so to him, the idea of the experience itself, the vision, the adventure of it all, and seemed to be far more important than this abstract idea of accumulating wealth for, this idea of, well, it'll make me safe or I'll do good, or I'll be golfing and relaxing in the future. It's like, no, let's play the game. So I would highly recommend it. Let's see, was there anything else I was going to say? I guess there's one more thought I wanted to share that, I've had jobs in I've had job-like experiences. I haven't had a job where I go to an office in a long time. In fact, I was driving with some of my new coworkers and we were on our way to work at 8 in the morning, and he was like, when was the last time you had a real job? And I was like definitely more than a decade. And to be honest, this whole putting on pants before 10 a.m., not a fan. Not a fan at all. That being said, so I've had a lot of experiences in different offices and working, closely with executives and entrepreneurs, and also working as, my years when I had more worker type relationships where I was not privy to the experiences and the decision making of the executives and the managers. And it's a fascinating division that happens, and it's almost like with teacher-student, where this is very hard to keep the division from happening. Where if you've only had a job, eventually, and you've never ran a business, at some point you're going to be frustrated and you're going to think that your boss or your manager, whatever, is an a-hole who's taking advantage of you and making money off the back of your labor and doesn't understand anything and is an idiot, blah, 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 blah. And if you ever fall into that trap, maybe if you know anyone who's an entrepreneur or runs a business, or maybe you read a book like this where you get to see how difficult it is and how much sacrifice goes in to being the manager and saying, I'm going to take care of all of this, and I'm going to make sure that people get paid as best as I can no matter what, and I'm going to try to keep things on track no matter how crazy it gets. That is it's a tough thing to be compassionate for, but I think that if as a worker you can try to be more compassionate, it opens up the ability for compassion to go from both directions. And maybe it's the responsibility of the manager to keep that dialogue going. The trouble is that in general, we can be simple people, and so managers or politicians or anyone who is making decisions has been punished over the years for being transparent. And so they start to try to tell you what they think you need to hear. And I guess I'm sharing this not because I have a solution, but more just as I'm aware of this disconnect that tends to happen. So communication, one person talking to the other and learning where they stand. All right. Clearly I'm enjoying the ability to be as loud as I want in the home studio. If you've tuned in the last few weeks, I've been in the office or offices of other companies and trying to do Hug Nation like this, and I've discovered that it's a little hard to try to really dig deep and feel the love and get in the flow when my flow is like a sphincter. So, let's take a moment and have a hug. Oh, yes! Grab this body, this miracle body, this self-healing system, this collection of cells collected into more groups of cells, collected into organs, collected into systems, collected into this body, which is in it itself a cell, collected into groups of cells, collected into communities, which itself makes up to another big city, which is collected into a bunch of cities, which is collected into communities, which is collected into states, collected into countries. Yeah, it's fractal. But what a joy to be right here in the middle of it all, experiencing the world through sensation and with the gift of thought, and being aware that these thoughts sometimes flow from deep inside us and inspire us, and sometimes are layered on top of us and steer us. And sometimes it steers us to places that may be influenced by a motivation that is way outside of who we are. And the spiritual path is about discerning exactly the origin of those thoughts and motivations. Is that something that's coming in from inside me, deep inside, that resonates with what I believe, maybe not believe, what I know? Or is this something that has been layered on top and has become a belief, and I may or may not even understand where it came from? And as we learn and start to recognize that, wait a minute, a whole bunch of stuff that I believe to be true is the result of things that I've been taught. And maybe I can't be so sure. And as we settle into that place of kind of floating, happy beginner's mind, unknowing, we can forgive ourselves for choices and decisions that we now know better. And hopefully we can also forgive others for their choices and decisions that, at the time, they don't know any better either. And that forgiveness of ourself and others is the most powerful tool we have to letting our light out and to liberating others. That forgiveness shatters the chains and lets our love shine. You don't have to hold somebody in a prison. You don't have to make sure that they don't get what they don't deserve. You can just forgive them and love them. And you'll find that as you do that with those around you, as you forgive and love them, as the things annoy you, you forgive and you love them, you'll find that, wait a minute, I actually was feeling, I was in chains just like that. I was holding myself back in the same way. So as we sink into that forgiveness, that love, forgiveness, love, more and more becomes obvious when those thoughts, when that truth comes from deep inside. Let's take 3 breaths together from that place deep inside, from our truth, from the oneness that is beyond our minds, that is our hearts. In through the nose, out through the mouth. On behalf of Grandpa Caleb and all the love warriors, happy Hug Nation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. I love you. Namaste.